You are on HOA checkmate. The tow hook was inches away. This is a winter safety emergency, and you are the problem. That is what Melissa Evans screamed at me in my own driveway on a Tuesday morning in Las Cruces, New Mexico, while a tow truck idled at the curb and sleet tapped against our coats. She was already waving a clipboard and pointing at my car like it was a bomb, and I had no idea what she was talking about. I had parked in my driveway the night before, same as always, and now she was telling me I was obstructing snow removal and she was escalating to towing for winter operations. I am a construction project coordinator, and I keep records for a living. Dates, times, deadlines, change orders, punch lists. I document everything, because in my line of work, if you do not have it in writing, it did not happen. That habit was about to save me, because Melissa was the landscaping committee lead for the Fairview Snowbank Community Association, and she had been looking for a reason to come at me for months. The sleet was picking up, tapping harder on the hoods of our jackets, and I could see a neighbor 2 driveways down pause, mid-scoop with his shovel, and just stare at us. Melissa jabbed her finger at my sedan. "You parked over the property line last night," she said, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "That obstructs the snow route. The city announced enforcement this morning, and I already called the tow company. You can be mad, or you can be compliant." I looked at my car. It was in my driveway. Not on the street, not on the sidewalk, not blocking anything. The driveway was mine, and the car was 2 feet from the curb. I said, "What are you talking about? I am not blocking a snow route. I am in my own driveway." She tilted her head like I was a child who could not read. The HOA winter policy states that any vehicle impeding snow removal operations is subject to immediate towing. You received the notice in October. This is enforcement. I did not receive any notice in October. I moved into this neighborhood in September because I am in a custody and visitation routine with my son, and I needed a place close to his school and my ex's house. The HOA sold itself as quiet and professional. What I got was Melissa, who complained daily about something. Lawn edging in November, holiday lights in December, now snow route violations that did not exist. The stakes were simple. My son stayed with me every Wednesday night and every other weekend, and the HOA kept scheduling enforcement actions and hearings on those exact days. If they stripped my gate fob or towed my car, I would miss pickup, and my ex would use it against me in court. Melissa knew that. She had asked about my schedule in October, all fake friendly. Now she was using it. The tow truck driver was climbing out of his cab, a thick guy in a reflective vest. Melissa waved him over. "I am authorizing the tow," she said. "This vehicle is in violation of the winter emergency clause." I pulled out my phone. I said, "Show me the notice. Show me the policy. Show me anything that says I cannot park in my own driveway." She smiled. "It is in the handbook. You signed acknowledgement when you closed on the property." I did not sign anything about snow routes. I flipped through my phone to the HOA documents I had saved. The handbook was 23 pages of vague nonsense about landscaping and exterior modifications. There was no winter emergency clause. There was no snow route map. I said, "There is nothing in here about this." Melissa turned to the tow driver. "Hook it up," she said. I stepped between the truck and my car. I said, "You are not towing my car without proof of a violation." The driver looked uncomfortable. He said, "Ma'am, if he is saying there is no violation, I need to see the authorization in writing." Melissa snapped her fingers and pulled a single sheet from her clipboard. She handed it to him. It was a pre-printed tow authorization form with my address and the date filled in by hand. The violation box said winter operations obstruction. No details, no photo, no timestamp. Just her signature at the bottom. The driver read it, shrugged, and said, "This works for me," and he walked back to his truck. I took a photo of the form over his shoulder before he could fold it away. My phone battery was at 42%. The cold was draining it fast, and I did not have a charger in my pocket. Melissa saw me take the photo and her smile got sharper. "You are not the first person I have corrected," she said, "and you will not be the last." The driver crouched behind my car and started hooking the tow rig. I said, I am calling the police. Melissa laughed. Go ahead. They will tell you this is a civil HOA matter. You signed the covenants. You agreed to enforcement. I dialed 911 anyway. The dispatcher answered, and I explained the situation as fast as I could. She said a deputy would be out within 30 minutes, but she confirmed what Melissa had just said. If it was an HOA violation, the police could not stop the tow unless I could prove it was illegal. I asked if obstructing a snow route was even a city ordinance in Las Cruces. She said she would check and call me back. My phone battery dropped to 38%. The tow driver was already lifting the rear wheels of my car off the pavement. Melissa stood next to him with her arms crossed, tapping a plastic ice chopper tool against her boot like a judge with a gavel. That tool was her signature accessory. She carried it everywhere during winter, used it to chip ice off sidewalks she claimed were HOA responsibility, and waved it around in arguments like she was conducting an orchestra of compliance. I had seen her use it to scrape frost off a neighbor's mailbox, just to prove she could. I said, if you tow my car, I am filing a complaint with the management company and the board. Melissa tilted her head again. The management company authorized this. The board will back me. You are wasting your time. The tow driver finished securing the chains and walked back to his cab. He called out, Where am I taking it? Melissa gave him the address of a tow yard on the south side of town, 15 miles away. She turned to me and said, You can retrieve your vehicle once you pay the tow fee and the HOA fine. The fine is $200 for the first violation. If you do not pay within 72 hours, it goes to $400 and we file a lien. I said, What fine? You just made this up 5 minutes ago. She pulled another sheet from her clipboard. This one was a violation notice printed on HOA letterhead. Bright white paper, neat rows of text, my address at the top, and a handwritten fine amount at the bottom, $200. The date was today. The timestamp was 7:45 a.m., which was 30 minutes ago. I had been asleep at 7:45. My car had been in the driveway since 9 p.m. the night before. She had written the notice this morning and called the tow truck before I even woke up. I took another photo. My phone battery dropped to 31%. The tow truck started rolling, my car hanging from the back like a trophy. The neighbor with the shovel was still staring. I waved at him. He gave me a slow nod and went back to scooping slush, like he had seen this show before and knew better than to get involved. Melissa tucked her clipboard under her arm and started walking back toward her own house, 3 doors down. She called over her shoulder, Have a compliant day. I stood in my driveway in the sleet, watching my car disappear around the corner, and I thought about the custody hearing I had in 2 weeks. My ex's attorney had already argued I was unreliable because I lived in an HOA with ongoing disputes. If I missed a pickup because I did not have a car, that argument would get stronger. Melissa knew that. She had asked about my son in October, all sweet and curious. Now she was weaponizing winter enforcement to mess with my schedule, and the management company was backing her. My phone buzzed. It was the 911 dispatcher calling back. She said the city of Las Cruces did not have a snow route ordinance on file, and no enforcement window had been announced that morning. I asked her to send me that confirmation in writing. She said she could not do that, but I could file a public records request with the city clerk. I thanked her and hung up. My phone battery was at 26%. I went inside and plugged in my phone. I opened my laptop and started searching for the HOA winter policy. The Fairview Snowbank Community Association had a website, but it was 3 years out of date and half the links were broken. There was no policy library. No meeting minutes. No board contact information except a generic email address that bounced half the time. I searched my email for anything from October. Nothing. I checked my closing documents. Nothing. I checked the county recorder's office website for the covenants. The file was 200 pages of scanned legalese from 1997, and the only mention of snow was a clause about keeping sidewalks clear within 24 hours of a storm. No towing. No emergency powers. No obstruction language. I screenshotted everything and saved it to a folder labeled HOA receipts. Then I called the management company. The number went to voicemail. I left a message explaining the tow and asking for a copy of the winter policy. I did not expect a callback. Melissa had said they authorized the tow, which meant they were in on it. I needed another angle. I texted my neighbor, the guy with the shovel. His name was Paul, and he had lived in the neighborhood for 6 years. He was fed up with the HOA and had told me once that Melissa ran the landscaping committee like a personal fiefdom. I asked if he had ever seen a winter policy or a snow route map. He texted back 5 minutes later, "No. She makes it up as she goes." I got fined last year for snow on my mailbox. I fought it and won, but it took 3 months. She hates me now. He sent a second text. She is tight with the tow company. I have seen the driver at her house. That was new information. I asked Paul if he would be willing to write a statement about what he saw this morning. He said yes. I asked if he had any emails or documents from the HOA about snow enforcement. He said he would check and send me what he had. Paul was my ally. He had been through this before, and he was willing to help. That mattered, because I knew I could not fight Melissa alone. I grabbed my keys and drove my backup vehicle, a work truck I kept for job site visits, down to the tow yard. It took me 40 minutes in the sleet. The yard was a chain-link compound full of wrecked cars and repo inventory. I walked into the office, a double-wide trailer with a space heater and a woman behind bulletproof glass. I said I was here to retrieve my car. She asked for my ID and the claim ticket. I did not have a claim ticket. She said I needed one to retrieve the vehicle. I said the HOA had my car towed without my consent, and I did not receive a ticket. She said the tow company did not issue tickets for third-party tows. I said, "So how do I get my car?" She said I needed to pay the tow fee and provide proof that the HOA had released the hold. I said, "What hold?" She pulled up my car on her computer. She said the HOA had flagged it as a violation tow and requested a 72-hour hold, which meant I could not retrieve it until the HOA cleared the fine and sent written authorization. I asked how much the tow fee was. She said $220. I asked if that included storage. She said storage started tomorrow at $30 per day. I did the math. If I did not get the HOA to release the hold, I would be paying $220 plus $90 for 3 days of storage, plus the $200 fine Melissa had invented. $510 total. For parking in my own driveway. I took a photo of the computer screen before the woman could stop me. She yelled at me and said photos were not allowed. I apologized and walked out. My phone battery was at 19%. I drove back home, plugged in my phone, and called the management company again. Voicemail again. I left a second message, this one angrier, demanding proof of the winter policy and immediate release of my car. I said I had evidence the city had no snow route ordinance, and I would be filing a formal complaint with the board. I hung up and checked my email. Nothing. I spent the rest of the afternoon building a timeline. I am good at timelines. I coordinate construction projects with dozens of subcontractors, and if I do not track every delay and change order, the job falls apart. I opened a spreadsheet and started listing every HOA interaction I had since September. The first entry was September 18th, when Melissa stopped me in the driveway and asked about my landscaping plan. I had told her I was waiting until spring. She had smiled and said, "We have rules about that." The second entry was October 3rd, when I received a violation notice for lawn edging. I had paid that fine $60 because I did not know I could fight it. The third entry was November 12th, when Melissa sent an email asking about my custody schedule, claiming she needed to know when I would be home for package deliveries. I had told her Wednesday nights and alternating weekends. The fourth entry was December 7th, when I got a violation notice for holiday lights, claiming my extension cord was an unapproved exterior wire. I had removed the lights and paid the fine, $80. Every entry had a date, a time, and a copy of the notice or email. Now I added today. January 14th, 7:45 a.m., Melissa issues a fabricated winter violation notice. 8:30 a.m., my car is towed. 9:15 a.m., I confirm with the city that there is no snow route ordinance. I saved the spreadsheet and emailed it to Paul. He replied 20 minutes later with a PDF. It was an email chain from last winter, where Melissa had claimed the HOA had authority to fine residents for snow piles on the curb. Another board member had replied asking for the policy citation. Melissa had never responded. The thread just ended. Paul wrote, "She does this every year. She invents a rule, enforces it, and then goes quiet when people push back. Nobody fights her because it is not worth the hassle. But she is dirty. I know she is getting kickbacks from the tow company. I have seen the driver at her house twice, both times after big tows." That was the connection I needed. If Melissa had a financial relationship with the tow company, that was a conflict of interest and possibly fraud. I asked Paul if he had any photos or documentation of the tow driver visiting her house. He said no, but he would keep his eyes open. I thanked him and went back to my spreadsheet. I added a new column, evidence. Next to the tow entry, I wrote, "City confirmation of no snow route ordinance. Photo of fabricated tow authorization. Photo of tow yard hold screen. Paul witness statement. Possible tow company kickback relationship." I kept my phone in my pocket because I was saving one clip for the finale. I had recorded part of the argument in the driveway that morning, right after Melissa said, "You are not the first person I have corrected, and you will not be the last." I had my phone in my hand, camera app open, and I had tapped record without her noticing. The audio was rough because of the sleet and the tow truck engine, but I had her voice saying, "You can be mad, or you can be compliant, and I am authorizing the tow." That clip was my trump card. I was not going to show it to anyone until I had the rest of my evidence lined up, because once I played it, Melissa would know I had been recording, and she would be more careful. I needed her to keep escalating so I could catch her in a bigger mistake. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the management company. It was short. It said my tow and fine were valid under the winter emergency clause of the HOA covenants, and I could retrieve my car once I paid the fine and the tow yard released the vehicle. It included a link to the handbook. I clicked the link. It was the same 23-page PDF I had already read. I searched for winter emergency. Nothing. I searched for tow. Nothing. I searched for snow route. Nothing. I replied to the email and said, "There is no winter emergency clause in the handbook you just sent me. Please provide the specific section number and page." I attached a screenshot of my search results showing 0 matches. I hit send and waited. No reply. I checked my email every hour. Nothing. I called the management company. Voicemail. I left a third message, this one calm and professional, saying I was requesting a copy of the winter policy in writing, and I expected a response within 24 hours. I said if I did not receive a response, I would assume no policy existed, and I would file a complaint with the board and pursue legal action for the wrongful tow. I hung up and checked my watch. It was Wednesday morning. My son was supposed to stay with me tonight. I needed my car back by 3 p.m. to pick him up from school. The tow yard did not open until 8 a.m., and I still did not have authorization to retrieve the vehicle. I called my ex and explained the situation. She was not sympathetic. She said, "This is exactly what I am talking about. You live in a neighborhood where you cannot even park your car without drama. How am I supposed to trust you with a consistent schedule?" I said it was not my fault. The HOA was lying, and I would have it sorted out by this afternoon. She said, "If you are not at the school by 3, I am documenting it." I said I would be there. I hung up and felt my chest tighten. This was exactly what Melissa wanted. She was not just fining me. She was sabotaging my custody arrangement. I drove back to the tow yard in my work truck. I walked into the office and asked again about retrieving my car. The same woman was behind the glass. She said the hold was still active and I could not retrieve the vehicle without HOA authorization. I said the HOA is refusing to provide authorization, and they are also refusing to provide proof of the violation. She shrugged. She said, "That is between you and them. We are just holding the car." I asked if I could at least get my registration and insurance documents out of the glove box. She said no. I asked if I could take a photo of my car in the lot for my records. She said no. I asked for a supervisor. She said the supervisor was not available. I asked for a receipt showing the hold and the fees. She printed a single sheet and slid it under the glass. It was a tow yard claim ticket with my car's make and model, the date, the tow company name, and a handwritten note. Hold per Fairview Snowbank Community Association, authorization required for release. No fine amount. No policy citation. Just the hold. I took a photo of the ticket. My phone battery was at 54% charged overnight. I walked out of the yard and sat in my truck. I had 4 hours until I needed to pick up my son. I called the HOA board president. I did not have his cell, but Paul had given me his name, Richard, and I found him on the neighborhood Facebook group. I sent him a message explaining the situation and asking for an emergency meeting to resolve the tow. He replied 10 minutes later, "I am aware of the issue. The management company is handling it. I cannot override their decision." I wrote back, "The management company has not provided any proof of a winter policy, and they are refusing to release my car. I need authorization by 2 p.m., or I miss my custody pickup." He replied, "I will ask them to expedite. That is all I can do." I tried a different angle. I went to the Fairview Snowbank Community Association office, a small suite in a strip mall on the north side of town. The office was supposed to be open weekdays from 9 to 3. I got there at 10:30. The door was locked. A handwritten sign taped to the glass said, "Office closed for weather." Back Monday. Today was Wednesday. I took a photo of the sign. I walked back to my truck and called Paul. I said, "The office is closed and the board president will not help. Do you know anyone else on the board who might push back on Melissa?" Paul said, "There is one guy, Steve. He is the treasurer. He has been asking questions about Melissa's expenses for months. He thinks she is billing personal stuff to the HOA. He might listen." Paul sent me Steve's email. I wrote to Steve immediately, explaining the tow, the missing policy, the fabricated fine, and the custody deadline. I attached the timeline, the photos, the city confirmation, and Paul's statement. I said, "I believe Melissa is abusing her authority, and I am requesting an emergency board meeting to address this before I lose custody time with my son." I hit send and waited. Steve replied 30 minutes later. He said, "I cannot call an emergency meeting without majority board support, but I can ask the management company to release your car while we investigate." He said he would email them immediately and copy me. 5 minutes later, I got the email chain. Steve had written to the management company, "Please release the hold on the vehicle at this address and provide me with a copy of the winter policy Melissa cited. I need this resolved today." The management company replied, "We are reviewing the request and will respond by end of business." That was not good enough. End of business was 5 p.m. My son got out of school at 3. If you are enjoying this wild HOA disaster, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss the next story, where I take these petty tyrants down with their own paperwork. I called the school and asked if my ex could pick up our son, and I would get him after I sorted out the car situation. The school secretary said my ex was already listed as the primary pickup, and I needed to coordinate with her directly. I called my ex. She said, "Absolutely not. You are on the schedule for today. If you cannot make it, that is on you. I will document it, and we will address it at the next hearing." She hung up. I sat in my truck in the strip mall parking lot and felt the sleet tapping on the windshield. Melissa had engineered this perfectly. She had towed my car on a Wednesday, knowing I had custody that night. She had invented a violation that did not exist, knowing I could not disprove it fast enough. She had coordinated with the management company and the tow yard to lock me out, knowing I would miss the pickup and give my ex ammunition. This was not about snow removal. This was targeted harassment, and she was using the HOA and the custody schedule as weapons. I checked my phone. It was 11:45. I had 3 hours and 15 minutes. I opened the photos I had taken and started organizing them into a single document. I wrote a one-page summary. On January 14th, Melissa Evans of the Fairview Snowbank Community Association HOA issued a fabricated winter violation notice and towed my car without legal authority. The city of Las Cruces confirmed there is no snow route ordinance. The HOA handbook contains no winter emergency clause. The management company has refused to provide policy documentation. The tow yard is holding my car on a 72-hour hold with no legal basis. I am requesting immediate release of my vehicle and a formal investigation into Melissa Evans for abuse of authority and possible fraud. I attached the photos, the timeline, the city confirmation notes, and Paul's statement. I saved it as a PDF. Then I did something I had been avoiding. I called an attorney. I had consulted with one during my custody case, a guy named Marcus who specialized in family law but also handled HOA disputes. I explained the situation in 2 minutes. He listened and said, "This is retaliation, and it is probably a breach of fiduciary duty. If she is getting kickbacks from the tow company, it is fraud. You need to file a complaint with the board, document everything, and if they do not fix it, you file in small claims for the tow fees and the fine. If you can prove she fabricated the violation, you can also go after her personally for harassment. But here's the problem. That takes weeks, and you need your car today. So here's what you do. You go to the tow yard, you tell them you are filing a police report for wrongful towing, and you ask them to release the car under threat of legal action. Most tow companies will fold because they do not want the liability. If that does not work, you pay the fee, get your car, and sue the HOA for reimbursement later." I said, "I do not have $500 to pay the fees." He said, "Then you need to make the tow yard fold. Bring the police if you can. Make it look official." I thanked him and hung up. I called the non-emergency police line and explained the situation. The dispatcher said a deputy could meet me at the tow yard to mediate, but they could not force the release without a court order. I said that was fine, I just needed someone there to make it official. She said a deputy would be there at 1 p.m. I checked my watch. I had 1 hour to get to the yard and set up the meeting. I drove to the tow yard. I parked my truck and went into the office. The same woman was behind the glass. I said, "I have a deputy meeting me here at 1 to mediate the release of my car. I am filing a police report for wrongful towing." She looked at me like I had just told her I was the president. She said, "You cannot file a police report for a civil tow." I said, "I can if the tow is based on a fabricated violation and the HOA refused to provide proof. That is theft." She picked up the phone and called someone. She talked for 2 minutes in a low voice, then hung up. She said, "The supervisor will be here in 10 minutes. The supervisor arrived at 12:50. He was a heavy guy in a company polo, and he did not look happy. He said, "What is this about a police report?" I handed him the 1-page summary and the photos. I said the HOA towed my car based on a fake violation. There is no winter policy, no snow route ordinance, and no legal basis for the tow. I have proof. The city confirmed it. The HOA will not release the vehicle, and I need it by 3 p.m. for a custody pickup. If you do not release my car, I am filing a police report for theft and suing your company for wrongful towing. The deputy will be here in 10 minutes to mediate." He read the summary. He looked at the photos. He said, "Do you have the release from the HOA?" I said, "The HOA is refusing to provide a release because they know the violation is fake." He said, "Then I cannot release the car." I said, "You are holding my car based on a fraud. That makes you complicit." He looked uncomfortable. He said, "I need to call the HOA." He pulled out his phone and dialed. I heard him say, "This is the tow yard. We have the owner here demanding release. He is threatening a police report. Do you have the authorization?" I could not hear the other side of the conversation, but the supervisor's face changed. He said, "Okay." He hung up. He said, "The HOA says you need to pay the fine first, then they will release the vehicle." I said, "I am not paying a fine for a violation that does not exist." He said, "Then I cannot help you." I said, "The deputy is outside. Let us see what he says." The deputy arrived at 1:05. He was a young guy, calm and professional. I explained the situation again and handed him the summary. He read it. He said to the supervisor, "Do you have documentation that the tow was legal?" The supervisor said, "We have authorization from the HOA." The deputy said, "Can I see it?" The supervisor went to the back and came out with the tow authorization form Melissa had given the driver yesterday. The deputy read it. He said, "This does not cite a specific policy or ordinance. It just says winter operations obstruction." "Do you have a copy of the HOA policy?" The supervisor said, "No, that is the HOA's responsibility." The deputy turned to me and said, "Do you have proof there is no policy?" I handed him the city confirmation notes and the screenshots of the handbook search. He read them. He said, "This looks like a civil dispute. I cannot force the release without a court order, but I can document it as a complaint." He wrote up a report number and gave me a copy. He said, "File this with the HOA and the management company. If they still refuse to release your car, you will need to take it to small claims. I am sorry I cannot do more." I thanked him and he left. The supervisor said, "So are you paying the fee or not?" I checked my watch. It was 1:20. I had 1 hour and 40 minutes. I said, "I am not paying." He said, "Then your car stays here." I walked out. I sat in my truck and called Steve, the board treasurer. I said, "The tow yard will not release my car without HOA authorization, and the management company will not respond. I need you to call them right now and force the release, or I am filing a lawsuit against the board personally." Steve said, "I will try." He called me back 10 minutes later and said, "I got the management company to agree to release the hold, but you still need to pay the tow fee." I said, "I do not have the money." He said, "I cannot help with that." I hung up. I called Marcus, the attorney. I explained the situation. He said, "You are out of options. Pay the fee, get your car, and sue for reimbursement. I will help you file." I said, "I do not have $220. He said, "Borrow it. Put it on a credit card. Do what you have to do. If you miss that pickup, your custody case gets worse, and this whole fight was for nothing." I hung up. I checked my wallet. I had $60 cash. I checked my bank account. I had $140 until payday. I called Paul. I said, "I need to borrow $80. Can you meet me at the tow yard in 20 minutes? He said. "I will be there." Paul showed up at 1:50 with cash. I thanked him and promised I would pay him back by Friday. I went into the tow yard office and told the supervisor I was paying the fee. He printed a receipt and took my cash. He said, "The hold is released. You can take your car." I walked out to the lot and found my sedan. It was covered in slush, and the rear bumper had a scrape from the tow rig. I took a photo. I got in, started the engine, and drove out of the yard. It was 2:10. I had 50 minutes. I drove straight to my son's school. I got there at 2:55. My ex was already in the pickup line. She saw me pull up and got out of her car. She walked over and said, "You made it." I am shocked. I said, "I told you I would." She said, "We will see how long that lasts." She got back in her car and drove off. My son came out a minute later, backpack on, and climbed into the back seat. He said, "Hey, Dad." I said, "Hey, buddy." He said, "Why is the car all dirty?" I said, "Long story. I will tell you later." He shrugged and put on his headphones. I drove home. That night, I drafted a formal complaint to the HOA board. I included the timeline, the photos, the police report number, the attorney consult notes, and a demand for reimbursement of the tow fee, the fine, and the attorney consultation fee. I requested a hearing within 30 days. I emailed it to the board president, Steve the treasurer, and the management company. I copied Paul as a witness. I hit send at 9 p.m. and waited. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the management company. It said my complaint had been received and would be reviewed at the next board meeting, scheduled for February 10th. That was 4 weeks away. I replied and said, I am requesting an emergency meeting within 7 days per the HOA bylaws. I cited the section number from the covenants. I hit send. No reply. That afternoon, I received a new violation notice in the mail. This one was for snow accumulation on my mailbox. The fine was $100. The date was January 15th, the day after the tow. I walked outside and checked my mailbox. There was no snow on it. There had been no snow on it all week. The sleet had melted everything. I took a photo of the clean mailbox with a timestamp. I added it to my evidence folder. This was escalation step 1, a brand new fine that appeared out of thin air with no vote. Melissa was doubling down. I called Steve. I said I just got a new violation notice for snow on my mailbox. There is no snow on my mailbox. This is harassment. Steve said, I believe you, but I need proof. I said, I have a photo. He said, send it to me. I emailed him the photo. He replied an hour later, I am bringing this up at the next board meeting. This is getting out of hand. I said, the next meeting is 4 weeks away. I need action now. He said, I am doing what I can. I hung up. The next day, I got a call from the gate access company. They said my fob was flagged for review due to outstanding violations. If I did not resolve the violations within 10 days, my access would be suspended. This was escalation step 2, a coordinated harassment push using the management company and the tow vendor together. Now they were adding the gate company to the mix. I lived in a gated community. If they suspended my fob, I could not get in or out without calling the guard every time, and the guard was only on duty during business hours. After 6 p.m., the gate was fob only. I would be locked out. I called the gate company and said the violations were fake and under dispute. The rep said, we do not mediate disputes. We just enforce the flags. You need to resolve it with the HOA. I said the HOA is lying. He said, that is between you and them. I hung up. I called Steve again. I said, they are threatening to suspend my gate access. That is retaliation. Steve said, I will email the management company and tell them to hold off. I said, they are not going to listen to you. He said, I know, but I am building a case. Keep sending me everything. I said, I do not have time for a case. I need this stopped now. He said, then you need to force a meeting. File a petition with 10 homeowner signatures, and the board has to meet within 14 days. I said, where am I going to get 10 signatures? He said, start knocking on doors. I spent the next 2 days walking the neighborhood. I knocked on doors and explained the situation. Most people were sympathetic, but did not want to get involved. A few said they had similar problems with Melissa, but they had paid the fines and moved on. One guy said he had fought her last year and she made his life hell for 6 months. He said, good luck, but I am staying out of it. By Saturday, I had 4 signatures. I needed 6 more. I knocked on more doors. One woman said she would sign if I promised to run for the board in the next election. I said I would think about it. She signed. Another guy said he hated Melissa and would sign anything that hurt her. He signed. By Sunday night, I had 9 signatures. I needed 1 more. I knocked on one last door, a house at the end of the block. A woman answered. She was older, maybe 60, and she looked tired. I introduced myself and explained the petition. She said, I know who you are. Melissa has been talking about you at committee meetings. She says you are a troublemaker. I said I am not a troublemaker. I am someone who refuses to pay fake fines. She said, I believe you. Melissa tried to fine me last month for painting my mailbox the wrong color. I fought it, and she backed down, but only because I threatened to call the media. She signed the petition. I had 10 signatures. I submitted the petition to the board on Monday morning. I emailed it to the board president, Steve, and the management company. I wrote, per the HOA bylaws, I am requesting an emergency meeting within 14 days to address ongoing harassment and abuse of authority by Melissa Evans. I have attached a petition with 10 homeowner signatures. I expect confirmation of the meeting date within 72 hours. I hit send. The board president replied 2 days later. He said, Meeting scheduled for January 30th at 6 p.m. in the community clubhouse. Your complaint will be on the agenda. I checked the calendar. That was 11 days away. I replied and said, "Thank you. I will be there." I started preparing my presentation. I spent the next week refining my evidence. I printed copies of the timeline, the photos, the violation notices, the city confirmation, the police report, Paul's statement, and the new mailbox fine. I organized everything into a tabbed binder. I wrote a 3-page summary with section headers: fabricated violations, abuse of authority, retaliation, coordination with tow company, proposed resolution. I practiced my presentation in front of the mirror. I timed it at 12 minutes. I cut it down to 8. I wanted it tight and factual. No emotion, no yelling. Just receipts. The day before the meeting, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was Melissa. She said, "I heard you are making a big show at the meeting tomorrow." I said, "I am presenting evidence of your harassment." She laughed. "You are not the first person I have corrected," she said, "and you will not be the last. You can be mad, or you can be compliant." I said, "I have proof you fabricated the violations." She said, "Good luck with that. The board always sides with me." She hung up. I checked my trump card one more time. The audio recording from the driveway argument was still on my phone. I had cleaned it up using a free app to filter out the wind and engine noise. Melissa's voice was clear. "You can be mad, or you can be compliant. I am authorizing the tow. You are not the first person I have corrected, and you will not be the last." I had not shown it to anyone yet. I was saving it for the meeting. I burned it to a CD as a backup and put the CD in my binder. I was ready. The meeting was at 6 p.m. on January 30th. I got to the clubhouse at 5:45. The room was set up with a long table at the front for the board and rows of folding chairs for residents. About 20 people were already there, including Paul, Steve, and the woman who had signed my petition last. Melissa was sitting at the front table, talking to the board president. She was wearing her pink belted wool coat even though we were indoors, and her ice chopper tool was on the table in front of her like a gavel. She saw me walk in and smiled. The meeting started at 6. The board president read the agenda. My complaint was item 4, after budget approval and landscaping updates. I sat in the front row and waited. The budget took 10 minutes. The landscaping updates took 15. Melissa gave a report on snow removal coordination and said the HOA had successfully enforced winter safety rules this season. She did not mention my tow. Nobody asked. Finally, the board president said, item 4, complaint submitted by the homeowner at this address. He read my address out loud. You have 8 minutes. I stood up and walked to the front. I handed out copies of my binder to each board member. I said on January 14th, Melissa Evans issued a fabricated winter violation notice and towed my car without legal authority. The city of Las Cruces confirmed there is no snow route ordinance. The HOA handbook contains no winter emergency clause. The management company refused to provide policy documentation. The tow yard held my car for ransom. I paid $220 to retrieve it, plus a $200 fine for a violation that does not exist. Since then, I have received additional fake fines and my gate access has been threatened. I am requesting a full refund, a formal apology, and an investigation into Melissa Evans for abuse of authority and possible fraud. I walked the board through the timeline. I showed them the photos. I played the city confirmation voicemail on speaker. I read Paul's witness statement. I showed them the new mailbox fine and the photo of my clean mailbox. I said, Melissa is making up violations to harass me. She has targeted my custody schedule. She has coordinated with the tow company for profit. This is retaliation, and it is illegal. I finished at 7 minutes. I said, I have one more piece of evidence, and I handed Steve a CD. I said, this is an audio recording of Melissa authorizing the tow and admitting there is no policy. I asked Steve to play it. He put the CD in a laptop and hit play. The room went quiet. Melissa's voice came through the speakers. You can be mad or you can be compliant. I am authorizing the tow. You are not the first person I have corrected, and you will not be the last. The room erupted. People started talking over each other. Melissa stood up and said, "That recording is fake." I said, "It is time-stamped, and I have the original file." She said, "You recorded me without my consent. That is illegal." I said, "New Mexico is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I am part of." The board president banged his hand on the table and said, "Everyone quiet down." He looked at Melissa and said, "Did you authorize that tow?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Did you have a policy citation?" She said, "The policy is implied in the covenants." He said, "Where? Show me." She opened her binder and flipped through pages. She could not find it. She said, "It is in the management company files." He said, "We have been asking the management company for the policy for 2 weeks. They have not provided it." She said, "That is not my fault." Steve stood up. He said, "I have been reviewing Melissa's expense reports for the past year. She has billed the HOA for 12 tow authorizations in the past 6 months. That is more than double any previous year. I also found 3 invoices from the tow company that list her personal cell phone as the contact. She is coordinating tows directly, not through the management company. I believe she has a financial relationship with the tow company, and she is using HOA authority to generate business for them. This is fraud." The room erupted again. Melissa's face went red. She said, "That is a lie." Steve said, "I have the invoices." He handed copies to the board. Melissa grabbed her ice chopper tool and stood up. She said, "This is a witch hunt. I am not going to sit here and be attacked by people who refuse to follow the rules." She walked toward the door. The board president said, "Sit down, Melissa. We are not done." She said, "I am done," and she walked out. The door slammed behind her. The board president looked at me. He said, "We need to investigate this. In the meantime, we are suspending all pending fines and violations issued by Melissa pending review. We are also instructing the management company to release any holds on your gate access." He looked at the rest of the board. He said, "We need to vote on whether to remove Melissa from the landscaping committee." Steve said, "I move to remove her immediately." Another board member seconded. They voted. 4 in favor, 1 abstention. Melissa was out. The board president said, "We will schedule a follow-up meeting to address reimbursement and further action." I said, "I want a formal apology and a policy clarification that prevents this from happening again." He said, "We will work on that." The meeting ended at 7:30. People came up to me and shook my hand. Paul said, "You did it." The woman who signed my petition last said, "That was amazing." I felt exhausted and relieved at the same time. 2 days later, I got a call from Steve. He said the board had met with an attorney, and the attorney had advised them that Melissa's actions created significant liability for the HOA. The attorney recommended a formal reversal of all fines, a refund of all fees, and a written policy clarification to reduce liability. The board voted to approve all 3. Steve said, "You will get a check for $420, which covers the tow fee and the fines. We are also issuing a formal apology and a new winter policy that explicitly states the HOA cannot tow vehicles without photographic proof of a violation and a 48-hour notice period." He said, "The attorney also recommended that Melissa be ordered to stop contacting you directly. Any future communication has to go through the management company." I said, "Good." He said one more thing. "The board is voting tonight on whether to refer Melissa's expense reports to the district attorney for investigation. I think it is going to pass." I said, "Let me know." He said, "I will." That night, Steve texted me. The board voted 5-0 to refer the case to the district attorney. He said the DA's office would review the tow company invoices and the call logs to determine if there was fraud. He said it could take months, but the board wanted it on record. I said, "Thank you." He said, "Thank you for pushing this. Nobody else had the guts." 3 weeks later, I got the refund check and the formal apology letter. The letter was short and corporate, but it said the board regretted the errors in enforcement and acknowledged that the violations were issued without proper documentation. It also said a policy clarification was being distributed to all homeowners to ensure compliance and transparency. The policy clarification arrived a week later. It was a 2-page document that spelled out the exact procedures for winter enforcement, including the 48-hour notice rule, the photo requirement, and a ban on towing without board approval. It was exactly the payback vector I had wanted, a policy clarification that destroys Karen's favorite tactic. Melissa could not ambush anyone with fake towels anymore, because the rules were now written down and she did not control them. I did not see Melissa for a month. Then one Saturday in late February, I was shoveling my driveway and she drove past. She slowed down, looked at me, and kept driving. No wave, no acknowledgement. She was pretending I did not exist. I was fine with that. A week later, Paul texted me. He said Melissa had been removed from all HOA committees, and the board had voted to ban her from contacting homeowners outside official meetings. He said she had shown up at the March board meeting and tried to speak during public comment, but the board president cut her off and reminded her of the contact ban. Paul said she left early, and he heard she was talking about moving out of the neighborhood. In April, I got a letter from the district attorney's office. It said they had reviewed the complaint and determined there was insufficient evidence to file criminal charges, but they had referred the matter to the state licensing board for investigation into the tow company's business practices. The letter said the tow company had been fined for improper authorization procedures and was under probation. It was not the full accountability I wanted, but it was something. The tow company could not pull the same stunt on someone else without risking their license. The final piece came in May. The HOA held its annual election. Steve ran for board president. He won. One of his first acts was to hire a new management company and fire the old one. He said the old company had been enabling Melissa's behavior and refusing to produce documentation. The new company came in, audited the files, and found dozens of violations that had been issued without proper authorization. They voided all of them and refunded the fines. Steve emailed me and said, "We are cleaning house. This is what you started." I said, "I just wanted my car back." He said, "You got a lot more than that." I still live in the neighborhood. My son still stays with me every Wednesday and every other weekend. My gate fob works. My driveway is clear. I have not received a single violation notice since January. Melissa moved out in June. I heard she bought a condo in a different part of town, somewhere without an HOA. Paul threw a small party when she left. He invited me and a few other neighbors who had dealt with her over the years. We toasted with cheap beer and talked about the worst fines we had received. It was funny in hindsight, now that it was over. One guy said he had been fined for a lawn gnome that was half an inch too tall. Another woman said she had been fined for a wreath that was the wrong shade of red. We laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that comes after you survive something exhausting. I keep the binder on a shelf in my office. Every page is still tabbed. Every receipt is still there. I do not look at it often, but I like knowing it exists. It is proof that documentation works. It is proof that you can fight back against petty tyrants if you are willing to do the work. It is proof that the funny karma moment, where Karen tries to interrupt and the meeting votes anyway, is not just a fantasy. It happens. You just have to force it to happen. The board eventually passed a resolution officially censuring Melissa for abuse of authority and stripping her of all committee powers. Steve read it aloud at a meeting in June. Melissa was not there to hear it, but it was read into the public record. The resolution also included the contact ban, making it official HOA policy that Melissa could not contact homeowners outside of official meetings. It was the outcome I had wanted from the beginning. The board votes to censure Karen in public, strips her committee powers, and bans her from contacting homeowners outside official meetings. It was not just a win for me. It was a win for everyone who had been afraid to push back. Looking back, the whole fight came down to one thing. I refused to let Melissa define reality. She said there was a policy. I demanded proof. She said the tow was legal. I demanded documentation. She said I was the problem. I showed the board she was lying. The trump card, The management company internal note, admitting the violation was fabricated, never materialized in exactly that form. But the audio recording and Steve's invoice evidence did the same job. They proved intent. They proved coordination. They proved fraud. And once the board saw the proof, they had no choice but to act. The HOA attorney forced a reversal to reduce liability, and Melissa was done. The custody hearing went fine. My ex tried to bring up the January tow incident, but my attorney presented the refund check, the apology letter, and the board resolution. The judge said it was clear the HOA had acted improperly, and it reflected no fault on my part. My visitation schedule stayed intact. My son still comes over every week. We are good. I still see Paul around the neighborhood. We shovel our driveways at the same time sometimes, and wave. Steve sends me board meeting agendas now, just to keep me in the loop. I do not go to most meetings, but I appreciate the transparency. The new management company is responsive. They answer emails within 24 hours. They provide documentation when you ask. It is night and day compared to the old company. The neighborhood feels different now. Quieter. Less tense. People are not afraid of getting random fines anymore. The winter policy is clear. The enforcement is fair. It is what an HOA is supposed to be. I never ran into Melissa again after she moved. I heard through Paul that she joined the board of her new condo association within 3 months. He said she was already issuing violation notices for holiday decorations. I do not know if anyone is fighting back. I hope they are. I hope they keep records. I hope they demand proof, because that is how you win. You do not win by yelling louder or being meaner. You win by being more organized, more patient, and more stubborn than the person trying to break you. You win with receipts, timestamps, and witnesses. You win by refusing to pay fake fines and forcing the system to prove its own rules. You win by making them put it in writing, and then using their own words against them. Melissa thought she could bully me into compliance. She thought I would pay the fines and move on like everyone else. She thought the board would back her no matter what. She was wrong on all 3 counts. The moment I started documenting, she lost. She just did not know it yet. And when I finally played that audio recording at the meeting, when her own voice came through the speakers saying, "You can be mad," or "You can be compliant," the room turned on her instantly. It was not just funny karma. It was poetic justice. She had said, "You are not the first person I have corrected, and you will not be the last." And I made sure she was right. I was not the last person she targeted. But I was the last person who let her get away with it. The homeowner who had warned me that fighting Melissa would make my life hell for 6 months was right. It did. But it was worth it. Because now my life is better. And so is everyone else's in the neighborhood. The rules are clear. The fines are fair. The retaliation is over. And Melissa is gone. That is the best part. She is gone, and we are still here, living our lives without fear of fake violations and midnight tow trucks. We won. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.